Raised her forward. We're good to go.
All right, good evening, everybody. Here we go.
We'll be crooked, but we'll work. Sorry.
Well, make it happen. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm so glad that you're all here. Please don't stop or think better. Apparently she had a family issue. She had a family issue. Please, if you talk to her, let her know we're thinking. All right, so calling this evening's meeting to order.
I'll find it later.
We have a quorum in place tonight, so Mary, how are you? Good to see you.
And in person.
Yeah, we're all kind of in person, and Sandy's on the phone. Hi, Sandy, or on the Zoom.
Video.
Hi, Sandy. There she is. All right, so calling the meeting to order. I wanted to thank everybody for coming out. For everybody who's here, Mike has a good presentation that's going to talk to us about the South County fuel reduction grant. That is a grant, a multi-fire safe council. I think there's six of us. Fire safe council grant that's going to work on fuels reduction along primary roadways. I hesitate to say evacuation routes, but primary roadways. And some fuels reduction work in communities. So he's going to provide us later this meeting a presentation on that. So thank you, Mike. So calling the meeting to order, I would like to have the council give me an approval for tonight's agenda. We got tonight's agenda. Okay. Kim's computer not working, so. Any adjustments to tonight's agenda? That Sunday, I believe. Hearing none, I'm going to call.
That's one. It's fair something maybe.
Yes, I will put you in directed. Principal space. Principal space. They have added principal space to item C under 6. Get that from the space. And just a reminder for this month would be our normal project reports for signage and other. So with the addition of 60 defensible space board requested by Mike, does anybody have any additions to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, then approve tonight's agenda.
Yes.
Sandy's got her thumbs up there, perfect. So tonight's item 2, approval of tonight's agenda. Item 3 is approval of.
Hang on 1 second, Jen. Go ahead, Sandy.
Sandy?
I can't hear.
You can see your lips moving.
Hear you.
Can you hear us now, Sandy?
About every third word.
So it's a microphone. So we need a microphone like up here, maybe.
Closer. Be more. Closer.
Can you hear me now, Sandy?
Yes,
Sandy, can you hear me now?
oh, you're out again. I can't hear. Sorry. You're frozen, Janet.
January council meeting minutes approved. I hear you now.
I hear you better now.
Sandy? Perfect. All right, going on to, and your timing is perfect, Sandy. Going on to item 4, the approval of the treasurer's reports for December and January. As you will recall, we had difficulties in December, in November, and we're unable to have the treasurer's reports approved in December. We did not get the treasurer's report. So Sandy has gotten that to us, and I sent that out to everybody with the meeting notice. So I'm asking for any questions on the December or January treasurer's report.
I was just.
Mike has a question, and Sandy, I'll pass it on.
I was just wondering what. See, grant reimbursement.
The EDFSC is is part of the Title III grant that we got from the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council to host the Greenway Days.
Okay.
And our last request for reimbursement is currently in with the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council. They're not yet reimbursed. And but that amount will be coming back to us.
Okay, all right. We had to pay out, but we'll be getting paid back.
Correct.
more. Okay.
12, most of that. We did overspend our $5,000 grant by
About 200.
She says,
200, Sandy says. So we did overspend our $5,000 grant by $200. I have not yet processed the reimbursement. So. Any other questions on the treasures? Sandy, anything you want to type in? Any other comments from you?
Just that once we get the reimbursement, we should have just about 2,000 in the account.
Just about 2,000 in the account. She says that once your chair gets off her behind and processes the Ockham Fair Play reimbursement, which she will do in March.
And our
So
chair is
any
behind a lot.
other questions?
Don't worry about our
What was that,
chair.
Sandy?
I say our chair is not sitting on her behind very much, so she is plenty busy and doing a good job.
She's trying to keep up, Sandy, but sometimes it's a little more difficult than other times. Thank you for that. Anybody opposed to the December and January 2 and 23 treasurer's reports? Hearing none, the December 22 and 23, January 23 treasurer's reports are approved. Information items, partner reports. I do not see Chief Witt. Is there anybody from the Pioneer Fire online to report? Hearing none. Anybody from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office? Hearing none. El Dorado County Fire Safe Council. Ken Penlot, Chair.
so it was a long meeting, 3 hours today. The bulk of the first portion of the meeting had to do with receiving an update, the defensible space ordinance, the county defensible space ordinance revisions. And so Ron Phillips, representing the Fire Prevention Officers Association, who's also leading that working group, which is comprised of the County Fire Safe Council, several fire districts, CAL FIRE, and a number of other folks, the county. Essentially, looking at the existing county defensible space ordinance and learning from changes or issues that have arisen over the last several years of implementation, and sort of taking that document and ordinance to the next level. Some key areas of change, and there were a lot of nuances and minutiae, but some key areas had to do a lot with bringing in critical infrastructure. So things like propane tanks and cellular phone towers and other critical infrastructure, which are not addressed by current state law in defensible space, are proposed to be addressed in the county ordinance. So, for example, there would be a requirement to clear defensible space around that sort of critical infrastructure. So that was a key piece. And then there's some just discussions about how enforcement will occur. And there's a philosophy really developing that enforcement is really the last tool, and there's really an emphasis on all of the other aspects of this in the education and doing a number of inspections and outreach prior to even getting to that point. To date, there has not been a landowner cited and property abated under the ordinance. There are some that are very close to that point, but the majority have been handled through multiple inspections and follow-up visits with the landowner. So the ordinance, again, is going through some revisions. There were a number of changes to the various definitions. The name of the ordinance itself is changing from the vegetation management and defensible space ordinance to the hazardous fuels and vegetation. I don't have the exact title in my head at exactly this moment, but at the end of the day, trying to get it away from this broader vegetation management, more focused on it's truly a defensible space around structures, and really trying to focus in on how to address that. And I know a number of folks asked some really good questions during the presentation, interesting aspects as to who is covered under the ordinance and who is not, and how school districts, special districts fall, state facilities, federal facilities, how they don't necessarily fall under the ordinance and the authority to do that. However, county properties do, and that's been one of the critical concerns that's come forward to the working group, is that a number of the county properties need to be abated to meet the intent of the ordinance. And so there was really an attempt to ensure that was strengthened in the ordinance. Where it's going at right now is there will be, it will ultimately go before the Board of Supervisors in the coming months, and it requires two readings. There's basically two steps. There's an initial reading where the draft proposal is put before the Board of Supervisors, and then there's a window of time where then that's open for public comment, and then it will come back to the Board of Supervisors for final decision and adoption. That's all anticipated to occur over the course of the next couple of months. And this is important because as the ordinance is being updated and revised, there's also some work going on, again, in the broader county infrastructure with the Office of Wildfire Preparedness and the advisory committee, all working with the Defensible Space Working Group to look at critical training statewide. We talked about this here before, but statewide, the state has adopted a standard for defensible space and home hardening training for all fire agencies across the state. And so every fire agency over time will be certified to a 3-day course that's adopted by the state fire marshal. So when fire agencies are putting their personnel through training, they will receive this 3-day course and be certified through the state. It's a standard that's been adopted statewide. In El Dorado County, we have the opportunity now to, at the end of March 30th and 31st, we have several of the folks that are part of that statewide cadre coming to El Dorado County to teach the course to trainers, if you will. So we have a train the trainer course coming on March 30th and 31st, where there will be, I believe, 24 individuals trained in this new curriculum. And from there, we will be able to modify that course and provide training to Fire Safe Council representatives and other non-fire agency personnel in a 2-day course that sort of abridges the 3-day course into an appropriate course for non-fire professionals. But we'll, in a cooperation between the county, CAL FIRE, the fire prevention officers, and the Fire Safe Council, will be offering several 2-day training courses in the spring, the first of which will be offered in mid-April. Those dates will be coming out for confirmation here shortly. The first course will be a Friday and Saturday, and then there will be some, what were the dates, Chancellor? Yeah, so April 21st and 22nd, and these are the important dates. That's a Friday, Saturday. That's the first window of opportunity. They are 20-person maximum, 20 students maximum per course. There will be a 2-day course that will have 1 day that's in classroom, and the second day will be in the field. So there will be actually hands-on defensible space evaluation training at homes, and then also ignition resistant construction or home hardening training, because all of this, it's no longer just defensible space. The certification includes that home hardening component, which is the standard that everything is moving towards, and fits right into all of the discussions that, of course, we're all having about how do we help our communities with home construction that meets fire resistive construction. So the first course is the 21st, 22nd, but there are options to add at least 2 more courses on different days over the course of April and May to try to accommodate as many folks as they can get through the training. I mean, there is a trade-off. The training for Fire Safe Council members, the County Fire Safe Council is going to support the cost of the training and the logistics. But there is an expectation, of course, that those councils that are sending folks, that with this investment being made, that we invest out here in opportunities to do as many of these home evaluation assessments as we can to support our community, because it's really trying to work hand in hand with the county and the state's programs so that we really bolster the number of homeowner evaluations and contacts that we have. Again, it's a non-punitive environment, but at the end of the day, there are approximately 50 to 55,000 homes in El Dorado County that reside in what's now designated as very high fire hazard severity zone by the state. The county has a goal, the working group has proposed a goal of ultimately getting to touching at least 7,000 of those 55,000 or 50-ish thousand each year, with the idea is at least a minimum of every 7 years getting back to each property, recognizing that there are over 100,000 homes in the wildlands here in El Dorado County. And so the fire agencies, the county, CAL FIRE can't meet that goal alone. It's really going to require this partnership with fire safe councils and others to go out and help assist with these homeowner assessments. And that's really where this is going, as a partnership. So when we talk about the ordinance, ultimately it is the enforcement tool, but that's not really where folks want to be. It's ultimately, yes, there will be those bad actors that ultimately need to be addressed because they refuse to comply when they have all the means and been given all of the opportunity. But the real goal is to be working with homeowners and property owners to obtain compliance and help them get there. And they've found success in El Dorado Hills, for example, where they've been initiating some programs with defensible space in the areas they've been working. After the course of 1 to 2 and sometimes 3 inspections, they've ultimately been able to achieve 80% compliance in given focus areas, and so without any punitive action being taken against the homeowner. So it does work with diligence and repeated education and helping provide those resources. So ultimately that's where it's going. But this is a big deal for the Fire Safe Council community and for El Dorado County, because no one else is really offering this course that's mirroring the state's course and being a bridge to assist training of fire professionals. So more to come there. There will be dates coming out. So we'll ensure that it gets to all of the fire safe councils, and then Janet and Mike and folks can work on what folks, if they want to attend and participate in the logistics of all of that. So again, a lot of time spent today talking through the ordinance and sort of this follow up, the bigger picture, where things are going there.
Question.
Yes.
Is Hugh going, or who is going to reach out so that folks can sign up? I know that we're interested in, or we have people interested. So how do we make sure they get signed up?
So I think, and we really have, this has literally been evolving in the last week as sort of the fine tuning of this has happened. Literally, the state instructor just agreed to teach the course within the last week. That'll be occurring in El Dorado Hills for the Train the Trainer on the 30th and 31st. Literally yesterday, the dates were picked for the first course, the 21st and 22nd. So I anticipate over the course of the next week, the Fire Safe Council will work on a plan to get that information out to all of the councils and have an application process to take names and get that started. So we're a little bit, I mean, we're really giving you breaking news, but we've got some time, because like last year we were even further behind the power. This year we're definitely on the course to get this out early. So I anticipate in the next several weeks you will see the information you need to apply.
So Mike, please.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I think my research, we've got about 1,000 residences in our council area. Do you know if there's data from the new maps yet that might show how many of those are high risk?
So the chat.
We're a mix.
Oh, yes. So the question John has is the new fire hazard severity zone maps that were released in December, which are still going through the public comment period. The public comment period for these new maps was extended through April 4th. So the state has not acted on the new maps. We're still operating on the old maps, and the state has not provided the data layers other than pictures of the new maps until the public comment window closes on April 4th, and that all of the comments then have to get forwarded on to the Office of Administrative Law. So it's a very rigid state regulatory process for implementing these new maps. And this CAL FIRE is very restricted and it's limited in its ability to do any public comment. They just have to listen to people and pass this information along. The plan is that as soon as the maps are adopted officially, the state will be providing those data layers in digital format to the county. The county will be providing that and making that available, and then we can overlay our fire state council area, I think it's 1,075, John, with the inclusion of Cedar Creek. And then we'll be able to determine, what that looks like. I will tell you, just looking at them, I mean, we've got hard copies, or we've got, PDF versions of the maps. The amount of very high fire hazard severity zone within the county has increased by 22%. And yes, a significant portion of that includes our, area here. So definitely more has gone into very high fire hazard severity zone. Where those all fit, we'll have to see. You can go to the county website at the Office of Wildfire Preparedness. There's a link to the CAL FIRE map viewer, and you can actually look up your parcel and see where it fits in the new map. So there is that ability to make that, but we just don't have the ability to make mapping products and do that, but that will be available. That ties right into something else that's happening, and we did. Oh,
Sorry. And thank you for this maps are great. So I looked at mine and I don't know if I think it changed, went from yellow to orange. And like you said, 22% got an increase. And so it gives us an opportunity to write a letter, which I did. And I'm just hoping that, because PG&E did a lot of work. I know a lot of homeowners have done a lot of work over the last few years. And I guess it was said it was over the last 10 years that they were compiling that data. And I think it's been, I don't know, the last 3 years, it seems like there's been more of a focus in this area about really people working together and getting things done. So, in my letter, I just wrote, I hope you take that into consideration. I mean, I know there are things like the weather changes and things of that nature, and we've seen some traumatic fires, but I'm just thinking with all the work combined that everybody's doing, maybe we're really where we were at,
Well, so this is an important piece, and Greg brings up sort of the cornerstone of this whole, and we could spend a whole day talking about this, but just to sort of put this into context, it's hazard versus risk. That literally comes down to the maps are like an earthquake or a flood hazard. It is what it is, and the hazard is the inherent risk out there absent us doing any work. It's literally what the landscape looks like absent all that. Certainly it's taking into account the built environment and all of that, but it's not taking in weather patterns, all those things are part of it now, but it's not taking into account any fuels reduction work, anything that we're doing to reduce the risk. The work we do on the ground to mitigate the impacts of this hazard to the risk to our infrastructure, our homes, that's separate. And so this is what we have to differentiate. The hazard is what it is. It's defined. And yes, you should all comment if you have concerns, but I will tell you, they're not going to change the maps based on we've put fuel break in Outingdale. What will happen though, is we use the maps to then define how we're doing work. Our community is very high severity zone. Therefore, we are prioritizing doing A, B, C, and D. Home hardening, defensible space, strategic fuel breaks, roadside fuels reduction. All of that is to mitigate the impact of that hazard on the things that are at risk. That then is where we really have to be articulating back to our granting folks that, hey, we want to do this to reduce our risk, back to the insurance industry to say, we are actively mitigating the risk, the impact of this hazard on our community. So that's the important differentiation, hazard versus risk. The risk is the piece that we have the ability to mitigate based on the hazard that exists out there. And that's the hard one, I think, for all of us to ask. We aren't going to change the color of the map just by putting fuel breaks in or doing all the good stuff we do. We have to change the impact of the red on our community by doing those things.
Well, I guess I'm. Have a little lapse of understanding, but I'm thinking. The fuel is a potential hazard.
The fuel is the hazard,
So if we reduce the
But the-
fuel,
but they're not taking that into consideration because here's what happens. We may not be maintaining that fuel break we put in. And the maps are a snapshot in time. And so they have to look at what would naturally be occurring out there absent us doing any work on the ground. And we may be diligent in putting our fuel break in every year and maintaining it. That's not, the state can't depend on that. No one can depend, they have to look at what the natural hazard is. Just no different, they look at what a natural earthquake hazard is or a natural flooding hazard is. We put in levees to mitigate the flood. We build better buildings to mitigate the impacts of the shaking from the earthquake. We put in fuel breaks to mitigate the natural hazard that exists from fire. But the state is looking at it from a pure perspective of, here's the hazard that exists absent you doing anything. Now, you as a community, you as a land use planner, you better build your communities to resist that, because if you don't do anything, it's coming right back to the exact same hazard. And that's all they're telling us is this is the hazard that you have. Now, what are you going to do to mitigate it to protect your community? And what you're doing is exactly what you're saying. You're putting in fuel breaks and all of the things that we do, the home hardening, defensible space. The hazard, the potential of that hazard is still there.
so but with like satellite imaging,
It's telling us what is out there. But it's also it's only telling us what's out there in combination with what the ground is capable of growing. There are fuel conditions, weather, all of these things are loaded into one big evaluation.
and I'm just worried about people getting hurt with their insurance.
That's exactly, so this is what it's telling us is we are going to get hurt with our insurance. So what are we going to do to fix it? Right? So we're going to flood. So what are we going to do to protect our community? I can't change the river. I can't change the fire, but what I can do is mitigate the impacts. Absent doing anything. So all this is doing is telling us what the hazard is. Now we have to go mitigate that to reduce the risk and those impacts.
Right, and I'm just worried that maybe it was telling us what the hazard was, since it was like over 10 years.
Over 10 years, fuel breaks have come and gone. Over fuel breaks, fires have occurred and not occurred. Fuel has regrown and has not regrown. The state can't depend on what we're doing. It has to, in good conscience, it has to tell us your landscape is capable of this hazard. What is you do what you,
The insurance companies would understand that.
Well,
That was really the piece of it.
and these maps don't drive the insurance decisions. The insurance uses the same data and lots of other data to make decisions, but what we do with the information provided by these hazard maps does drive the insurance. And so we have to look at these maps, and that's how we do our planning throughout the county to decide how are we going to mitigate the risk associated with these hazards, and then go back to the insurance companies and say, yep, we're aware of the hazard and here's what we've done. That's where we're at.
And it's in terms, and I know the microphone's direction, but it's in terms of both hazardous fuel, but also what home hardening are you doing on your property? Because the insurance companies are very interested in, is your house hardened against a fire? Do you have the appropriate fence? Do you have a fire rated roof? Do you have wood siding versus the cement siding? Do you have things, do you have a 5-foot defensible space around the no burn zone around your home? And all of those are being evaluated in terms of, that's where insurance companies are coming, that's where they're interested in, and maybe Mike can talk about that further.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it came up in our South County project today. Fire breaks, if you did one today for Outingdale, for instance, if we didn't maintain it or go back in and kind of prevent the regrowth, it would be essentially useless in 3 or 4 years. It would come back. Look at the Sand Ridge fire area, the burn area. It's already mostly green. So that's what Ken's saying. Now, in terms of insurance, I'm an insurance agent. I had an interesting conversation with Chief Witt, because I was arguing on behalf of a client that did a lot of defensible space hardening. And according to Chief Witt, the address where this person was, in fact, all of Outcome Fairplay, it's a 5.5 ISO rating, which is moderate. But in the insurance application that I use, it's rated as a 9, which is very high. So I argued with underwriter after underwriter, escalated for 2 hours last week. I essentially got, yeah. So the insurance industry, there is a process. You can actually, if you don't agree with the assessment that they've given of your fire rating, you can appeal. There is an appeal process that you can use through your agent through the underwriting. And you can, if you can prove to them that you've got the 100 or 300 feet, a 30-foot green zone, et cetera, 100 to 200 foot denuded landscape that's not going to transmit fire. And as Janet said, stucco, steel, cement, et cetera, Vulcan vents if you can afford them, then yeah, then you're in a much more you're in a much better position to win an appeal against an insurance agency than just kind of letting it go.
Interesting.
So Chief Witt did say though that the ISO rating that they had done was from 2015. That's 8 years ago. So they are currently in the process of revising it, and they'll be submitting that to the insurance industry and the applications and the algorithms that they use. And he actually commented to me, he said, Mike, given what's happened between the last 8 years, I fully expect that to maybe go from a 5.5 to a 6, but I don't see it going to a 9. So there's this huge disconnect between what the insurance industry is taking from the state and what local fire chiefs are seeing in their communities with the amount of home hardening, defensible space, and things like we are doing as a fire safe council.
Because it's Ken would know, I'm thinking it would make a real difference, the efforts.
It does, and we need to, and I think at the end of the day is it's not, we don't need to focus on the maps. We need to focus on what we're doing to mitigate the impact of the maps, and that's what we articulate to the insurance companies. That's what our fire districts are engaging in. And it's what we do with the information that the state has a responsibility to provide the information. What we do with it and how we mitigate the red on the map, that's up to us, and how we articulate how we're reducing that threat. And that, so I would encourage you, because we could dive into this all day, but I would encourage you to go to the state's website or to the county's website. There's a lot of good explanation of hazard versus risk and exactly what the maps do and what they don't do. And yes, if you have concern, absolutely should send your comments into the State Board of Forestry, State Fire Marshal's office prior to April 4th. So kind of really that where I was headed, I think is exciting is the county GIS is working on a version, the first version of sort of an interactive public-facing web-based mapping application. Ultimately, the county will be a repository for much of the data on projects and field work and all kinds of data that are occurring in the county relative to fire prevention, fuels treatment activities. And partner agencies have all bought into the county is the right spot to sort of house that, where they hold the data or at least have the link to other organizations to get the data. but it will be the place that sort of is that central hub to have the data. And so the professionals, folks planning projects, all of that will be able to access where projects are occurring, where they're planned, where they've occurred in the past, and have a much better picture of what the landscape looks like. So they're not doing things in a vacuum, that they can have a better understanding of who else is working on things and coordinate work on the ground and help make decisions about how to apply for grants, where to put efforts, all of that. And since the world is really turning towards that digital GIS world, this is the best really way to get it done, and everybody's pointing in that direction. And the county is truly stepping up to help with that. Where it's really helpful for us is that this external facing, the professionals will have all the, the whiz bang stuff and work on GIS data and make good maps and all the data, all that. What we will be able to do as public people is we will have the public will have access to an online mapping application. And for folks that have used the county's GotNet app, it's similar to that, only it's going to be much more user-friendly and much more focused on the work that we do. So as we are planning fire safe council boundaries or Firewise community boundaries, or making assessments that John's talking about, I want to know how many homes are in the Occam Fairplay Fire Safe Council boundary. All of that information will be available, and you will be able to do on your own online query. And there will be limitations initially to the amount of data available, and this will grow over time. But for example, you will be able to look at the fire district boundaries, the fire safe council boundaries, the road layers, the fire hazard severity zone layers. And there's a number of other pieces in there. I know Janet looked at it with me this week also. But the county has purchased and is working on a brand new application that will allow much more web-based, user-friendly interface. And so we are not that far off from kind of daylighting the very first or seeing the very first release of an online tool. And it will you will be able to draw polygons and maybe put a project on a map. We'll be able to measure, we'll be able to do some things that are really conducive to the kinds of things we talk about, and query data, and hopefully have some charts or graphs that come from that and compile data. This will grow over time, and with more functionality. There will be layers of accessibility. If a fire safe council, or we're working together with other agencies, there will be different layers of access for different users to be able to have more data. But at the end of the day, the kinds of information we're asking for from County GIS every day will be accessible to us, and there'll be functionality in this tool, so we don't have to keep asking the County GIS office for maps. If we want to have a map to display something, we'll be able to build our own, print it out, and take it down to the printer and get that done. This is a huge step, because it's going to, one, alleviates a lot of burden on the county's program, but more importantly, it allows us to start looking at all the same information that everyone else is looking at, and talk about projects, talk about activities, look at information, and make some decisions and have some discussion right out here at this level. Ultimately, it will be populated with where all of the projects are, when all the projects in the community wildfire protection plans, where CAL FIRE is proposing projects, where emphasis areas are for defensible space efforts each year by the county and the state and others. All of that will be available publicly to look at right online. And then you can look at it in the context of the whole county, or you can look at it in the context of our community or any subset that we want to do. So there isn't a time frame, but I can tell you the county GIS folks are very on this. They want to do it. They're interested in it. And everyone's driven to get it done fairly quickly. So that's a big piece of what's coming out of this coordinated effort at the county. The county provided additional Title III funds to the State Fire Safe Council. For everybody that remembers, we did our chipping day here. The $5,000 that went towards the 2 chipping days, the dumpster. We're closing out that round, and other Title III monies that came from the county. And remember, Title III are monies that come from the federal government, the Forest Service in particular, because they own land in the county, which is tax exempt. So there's no property tax that comes from the federal land that's in El Dorado County. So the federal government, in lieu of those taxes, provides funding to the county to make up for that. And while it sure doesn't make up for all of what doesn't get recovered if that were private, but at the end of the day, it's earmarked specifically for things. In this case, Title III works for the sheriff's office for search and rescue support, and it goes directly for things like community wildfire protection planning, firewise communities, education, outreach, things right in the wheelhouse of what we do. And we've been working very closely with the county to talk about how important that money has been to help us for the things that we're doing. And they're very interested in trying to find a way to continue. We have to kind of negotiate with the sheriff's office because they get some of the money for their search and rescue program. They got a new helicopter this year. So we said, you got a helicopter, let us have a little bit more money.
It's not coming until September, October.
Yeah, right. But it's like, no, everyone's saying. Well, yeah, pretty, but everybody's been gracious about it. But the point being is and Janet reported on it when she gave her treasurer's report today, but literally, just as of last week, the County Fire Safe Council received $120,000 in Title III funding to be used. And the philosophy of the County Fire Safe Council is how do we get this out on the ground? Two programs. One is I think everyone wants to do more of the mini grants out to the associate councils to help with the Greenway stays and community programs, and also really bolster the defensible space program for seniors, veterans, and low income. That was started by Ernie Laurie on $5,000 from the Friends of Seniors, and it lasts for a day, and then we close it. And now PG&E provided $100,000, SMUD, the veterans group, and now we've put a whole bunch of Title III money that we had in there. We're really trying to make that a year-round program, just like our chipping program. Because when Mike and the team are out there talking to homeowners about doing defensible space, this is one resource that he and the team can provide to community members, particularly those that are disadvantaged, to help get that work done. The county's recognizing that if they bolstered the support to the council to help that again takes the onus off having to get to where we're abating and finding people, that we really help people get there. So again, there's a lot of support to try to help homeowners get defensible space done. And literally probably after 3 hours of a meeting today, the common theme throughout the entire meeting was it's about defensible space and communities and home hardening. And so this is one more effort to get that done.
And
Yeah.
I got a couple of questions. Are they gonna have a program to get rid of like old cars and crash,
So it's an interesting point you raised, Mike. The most common problem when you find the most egregious fenders of defensible space, they also seem to be the same ones that have hazardous materials and cars and debris and all of that. So typically, there are multiple code enforcement issues associated with all of that, and that falls within a whole nother program, and it's more challenging, of course, to deal with the disposal of all of that. But those discussions are happening. They're trying to find some ways to team up with code enforcement to when they go out and look at these issues that quite frankly, they're really looking at the most egregious defensible space offenders are the ones folks really want to target. And those are the ones that are refusing to do it after multiple opportunities and resources have been provided. But at the same time, look at the other violations that are occurring on the same property to try to address all of it. So definitely it's on the radar. It's just a challenging issue to over.
and is the new class gonna be more intense?
Yes.
Because the other one, really wasn't very.
No, so Mike raises a really good, and we've talked about this with Mike Cook, when we asked a lot of folks, would you be willing? Because here's where we're at. The course that and again, we appreciate everything that everybody did to help teach this, but the original course was 2 hours. And it was really just talking about some of the basics and the laws and public resources code, things that applied to this. But the course that was provided to fire safe councils really fell short of what needed to meet the need and provide the tools that we all need to get this done. This course will be nothing like the original course. It's literally, we've had to pare it down from 3 to 2 just to make it palatable. And the 3-day course that the fire professionals will have, it's more into the logistics. It's about radio operations and the command and control things that fire agencies have to have. So those things are taken out, and this is right down to the bottom line of here's the fire behavior, here's all the things relative to vegetative spacing and limbing and all of that, the codes, the ordinances, the state law, how all that applies, and then diving deep into the hands-on, literally spending a day going out to a community and doing evaluations on defensible space and home hardening. And then having those conversations out of the ground and trying to answer all those questions and doing it in, so why the classes will only have 20 people, 20 students, because they'll be matching up an instructor with, 5 or 6 people max. So that there's a plenty of one. This will be a very, and that's what we were concerned about. This is a huge commitment for volunteers to take on, which is why also we probably have to have a commitment as well to say we're going to use this training and really try to the best we can to increase our interaction with the community and see how many more of these assessments we can get done. But yes, it will definitely be a commitment, but I think what we can find is going to be very valuable, and it's going to be taught by folks that are passionate about defensible space, and it's a team taught course. It's not any one agency. This is the standard that not only the county is collectively, all the agencies are operating under, but it's built from the statewide standard that's now required of fire agencies to be certified to do defensible space. So it's a big deal.
One last question, is the evaluation will be better? Have you seen a copy of what they can use for evaluation?
So they're still looking at the form. Everything's based on the original CAL FIRE, what's called the LE100, which was the form that you're all using to do evaluations. What you're using is sort of an amended version of that. And this is the other piece that is up for discussion. So where the county wants to go with its program is to start with the state form that's sort of amended for the county, and then have an addendum that addresses the issues. So you have state law, the Public Resources Code, which addresses certain aspects that the state requires for a defensible space. The county ordinance mirrors that, and then there are additional requirements. For example, the good neighbor, which that name is changing. They changed it too. But basically, you can go onto a neighbor's property and require clearance if you can't meet 100 feet on the existing property. So there are things where the county ordinance is more restrictive. So the county will have an addendum to the standardized form. So those are all, of course, paper forms, but this is the other piece. And I know we've talked to Mike about this and others, and we're trying to, this is the sensitive part. The value in fire safe council members and community members doing these assessments to help our community members is that it's non-punitive, that it's non-threatening, that there are community members coming in to help. Well, this is the exact same criteria and assessment that the agencies are using when they do actual inspections. We want it to all be the same because we want everybody to get to the same bar. Everyone would like to be able to take credit for the fact that, and this goes back to what I said earlier, we would like to get everybody would like to get to 7,000 assessments / inspections every year. To get there, it's going to require the actual inspections from fire departments and evaluations from our community. Well, how do we keep track of that? We don't want to put in a database that we went to 4061 DeAugustini Drive and that person failed, right? But we do want to say we did. We're covering, so we want to take credit for the good work. So everything's going electronic. The value in the database is that we can then turn around and say our community has a very robust program, that we take this seriously, and this coordinated effort between the government and our community is we're making all these assessments. We need help. We want to go get a grant. We can point to this and say, here's what we've done. So the county's going to build the GIS firm is going to build a dashboard for us that we can start talking about how many acres we're treating every year. We can start really articulating to the public in a simple way these efforts. We want to be able to take credit for the defensible space work that we're all doing together, but we want to do it in a way that's not threatening to homeowners. I don't have the answer on how we can do that to make everybody comfortable. But so that's a long answer to your question, Mike. But at the end of the day, we're going to be using the exact same reporting format. The state has what's called field maps that is adopted statewide. It's a database that it goes statewide. We just have to make some decisions and have some discussion about our fire safe council evaluations. Do we want those included in that database? And if we do, what does that look like? How do we, black out the things
Right.
that protect people? So more to be discussed there.
Then we're gonna have to make a second evaluation. Because, if you tell somebody you need to do this, and this. They don't do it, what does that prove?
Right, and we don't want homeowners to think that if you're coming out to give them advice that you see things that would be in violation, that you in turn call the fire department and say, you need to go inspect them, because we don't want that. Nobody wants that. So yes, the fire departments are often doing second inspections to try to see if the folks are making change. I've talked to all of these folks. The philosophy by the fire agencies, including CAL FIRE, is if they're seeing progress, nobody wants to cite people. They want to just help. So if they come back for a second inspection and the homeowners are making progress, they will give them leeway to keep working as long as they're doing it. And I think that's where we can get that message out, that the goal here isn't to cite and fine people. The goal is to help people get the end result and get their home safe. And that sometimes takes multiple visits and support.
Well, I think most people are still back in the era where trees growing through their decks is a good thing.
Until they die, right?
They die or that burns down. So that's another thing they really need to change, is because I have a friend down the street. I've been trying to get him to cut some trees and till they fall. Like one time I told him, I said, you need to cut this tree by your bathroom. He goes, well, can't you just cut the eave? And I said, you don't have any eaves on that side. You have to cut that tree down. Finally did. But that's a big part of a lot of.
Well, I would encourage everybody to just kind of stay tuned to what's coming out, this training. I think it's going to be, a lot of those questions will come up and there'll be a lot of discussion, but it's definitely moving us light years ahead of where we've been. Do I have to take it?
One real quick thing, I remember when a few years ago, I think it was now, when we went out and assessed people's property, they had the option to be anonymous, I think, but just get, correct me if I'm wrong, but just get an evaluation, but not have it go to CAL FIRE if they decided.
That's what we
they didn't
decided.
want to. It was the property owner's option.
So this is the same standard that everyone will be using for doing the risk assessments for Firewise communities. So yes, remember a number of years ago, when we did our first risk assessment, we had teams, we were all out there doing these assessments, and we achieved our Firewise community. Well, every 5 years, you need to redo that risk assessment. So we are 2 years away from having to redo that risk assessment. A lot of change coming in that respect. This new defensible space home hardening standard is the new standard for making those assessments. That's where everybody wants to be. So when we're making the assessments, we really need to be doing it to the same standard. It's all the same, whether you're doing a risk assessment or a D-space home hardening evaluation for Firewise, or you're doing it to meet compliance, it's all the same. And so the more people that get trained, and we all understand that, we will work with the community members. But yes, the whole idea is it's not to be punitive, and it's trying to make sure homeowners recognize we're not doing this to report them to the agencies, but they do need to be showing some improvements so we can maintain our Firewise status. So that's something important for us to have on the radar down the road, is we're going to be needing to build a new risk assessment in the next couple of years so that we can get that done. And there will be more engagement by fire agencies and others to assist with getting that done. We won't necessarily be out there on our own, somewhat like we were last time. So moving things on fairly quickly, we recognize that the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council's website has had challenges. It's really overtaxed from where it was originally developed. We have two significant programs, Chipping and Defensible Space, that are requiring a lot of online application support and functionality behind the scenes. There's a lot of data being stored on the website. Nothing's really been improved or updated or upgraded over the years. So we've had some issues the website's being managed, both it's being hosted by one vendor and managed and designed by a second vendor. All of it's going to get rolled up now into one vendor, LambdaTech, who will host the site and also help us to do some complete revisions to it. This is important because, I mean, one, it's the front end of everything we do in the fire safe councils. It's the link to all of the associate fire safe councils. And not only now is it supporting the defensible space and chipping program application process, but the fire safe council now is coming online with a hazardous tree removal program. So the council was successful in receiving a $1.2 million grant to do hazardous tree removal on individual properties from Omo Ranch to Pollock Pines. And literally today, the council approved moving forward with a contractor to manage that program. And so there's been some information on the website. More will be coming out here post haste as the contract is solidified with the project management contractor. But essentially, landowners will be able to apply if they have a hazardous tree that's within proximity of their home and it meets the criteria. And then they can apply and get that done. And so there will be contractors then coming out to do that. Mike.
I'm not gonna name names, but I referred one of the community members here to a tree sturgeon that I've used because she had a 140-foot pine tree that was leaning toward her house. It definitely meets it was the last tree that she hadn't taken down. It definitely meets the criteria for a hazardous tree. But she had the work done like last weekend or weekend before. Can she get into that program still?
Probably not, because I think one, it's the program really isn't active yet, and two, it won't be paying in arrears. You'll have to use one of the contractors that are part of the program. Because they needed the management companies to confirm that they're licensed and they're doling out the jobs based on proximity. So very much like the chipping and space program.
And is there a limited focus area as well?
Well, no, it is from Omo Ranch to Pollock, and I mean, it's not going to be on the divide, and it won't be out in the Low Country. I don't know if there's actually a physical map. I'm sure that'll be part of it. But that's the general area. Metro 3 website. I think there's oh, yes, go ahead.
It's so nice. Hazardous tree. Your house.
I mean, without seeing it, I can't say for certain, but yes, it sounds like to me that's the kind of thing that they're talking. One it's within the proximity of the home.
That's not necessarily.
Well, it's a hazardous to the property and home. And
So it's just.
it's too close to the house, 140 foot leaning toward the home. It would have taken out half her house.
Be something that if that tree caught.
It would drop right over the home.
Or have a lot of.
And there are, and I don't, unfortunately don't have it in front of me, but they very clearly kind of defined what the hazard tree is. I just don't have it in front of me. So but that will all be there. They'll have to be.
Well, we've got a program for you.
We literally slept on the other side of the house. We have 3 really large pines that if they, coming in the way of the wind. Would have crushed our house. Scary.
Yeah.
So that would be a program, watch that program, see if you qualify based on where you live and the foot.
So they should be becoming active here fairly soon. Like it's a Pat Wire won't waste any time getting the contract put together with the contract. We'll get that signed and they'll kind of start. But we'll get but they've got to kind of build the back end of the application piece. They've got it'll of course require right of entry and all the things that we do. And this one's much more detailed because this is a very technical kind of a program. So there's a lot to it. So just kind of watch where that's coming, and we'll make sure that all of the Fire Safe Council chairs, including Janet, get all that info to share. We heard word today.
The website.
Yeah, the website is not quite fixed yet, but yes. We heard today that there's an additional Fire Safe Council that's interested in the Fort Jim area, and so we are literally right around 30 Fire Safe Councils that they come online, and very different from just a few years ago where there may be 10 or 12, and that sort of, and I know I've taken a lot of time, Janet, but that sort of wraps up the whole kind of discussion that occurred today, and we collectively, I don't just mean the fire safe councils, but we in El Dorado County, and we're not alone in just here, the state, things are happening so fast with the communities that are being impacted and the work on mitigation and grant funds and the policy initiatives coming from the state and the federal government and the counties, our own county where we've had, several major fires with large loss in the last several years. All of this is sort of accelerating. How are we getting things done on the ground? And, just a few years ago, I kind of look at the pre-campfire days, the pre-night 2018, folks weren't paying the level of attention that they are now. We didn't have 35, right? People are concerned. They're realizing that fires are real risk. Well, all of that is ramping up throughout the state, and there's a lot of interest, and that's also creating lots of demand on all of the resources, to people's time, the technical support, funding. The state, of course, has been ramping up grant funding particularly through CAL FIRE with the California Climate Initiative funding and the Forest Health grants and the fire prevention program grants. To $120, $150 million kinds of programs. Well, now that we have 30 fire safe councils, almost everybody's writing grants and sort of competing with each other. And county organizations, CAL FIRE, everybody's just saying, how do we can't possibly get out to 30 fire safe councils to provide support. We can't possibly do all of this. How do we organize how do you help us organize? What's the most important place? If you had to prioritize, what's the most important place in El Dorado County to work if you had to pick one today? And no one wants to be that person that says, well, it's here or it's there. So the Board of Supervisors said, well, but we got to figure out a way to make this work. And so that's what they did last year. They directed the chief administrative officer to say, we need the county to provide some leadership, not to take things over, but how do we provide some leadership to facilitate those kind of discussions? And our communities have been top notch in the work they do. We've got work grants going on, but a lot of silos, and it's starting to impact Department of Transportation and where they're at with things, and it's impacting the Forest Service, and everybody's trying to figure out where to put their money and who to work with. And the Fire Safe Council county is at $14 million in grants right now, and now what's happening is that work is starting to get done, and that's generating just a huge volume of invoicing and tracking and paying bills. So we are now seeing what's happening from our success, and we're just one piece of that. The RCD is having the same challenge. Everybody wants the RCD to manage their projects. I mean, they dealt with Sierra Tahoe all winter, trying to get that facility back open for ski season. So everybody's being impacted, and at some point we have to cry uncle and say, we can't all just keep doing what we're doing. How do we take a step back and look at the big picture and help us work together to figure out what those priorities are, have some consensus on things, there's some give and take. And so the county's facilitating an effort with sort of the key partners and agencies, including the Fire Safe Council, to have those discussions. And there's significant process being made. The Defensible Space Ordinance rewrite is a huge piece of that. It's all happening under this framework. The challenge is, we cried uncle at the County Fire Safe Council and said, the projects that are being proposed, we can't take them on. And we've gone to the partners and they're saying, these are good projects, but maybe that they're not necessarily all right for this year. How can we spend a year thinking about other ways to fund them or getting them in our plan? And we haven't done that before. And so it created that we had to make some tough decisions this year about not supporting some grant proposals from some of our associate fire safe councils, as the county as the fiscal sponsor. That's challenging because people want to get real work done on the ground, and we have to say the agencies are struggling to try to figure out how to plug that in and support it. And at the Fire Safe Council, we don't have the capacity to do the fiscal sponsor this year. The RCD is struggling to be a project manager. And so we had to redirect or postpone, and that created a lot of discussion today and certainly some angst, and totally understand that. And we don't have a good process this second to try to adjudicate and work through that. So there's a strong commitment by the greater Fire Safe Council community to come to the table and spend the next several months to a year fixing our process so that there's a clear expectation of all of our fire safe councils as to what they need to do when they're proposing a grant. But at the same time, the partners and agencies and organizations that are part of this coordination effort, putting the strategy together that really defines what this new landscape and playing field is, so everybody knows. So it was a tough meeting today, but at the same time, a lot of good discussion about where we want to go going forward. And there's just a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, but we are doing a lot in this county, and our model of all volunteers, we've kind of broken it. And so we've got to ask for some help, whether it's new staff support, whether it's, engaging with the county to have them provide some support, whatever the model looks like. And we're asking for the sort of a group, including the grants management group, to help us come up with some recommendations and work on that. So we're going to be working hard on that for the next couple of months into the year. But it's going to position us much better as we come out of this to do more things and better support all this stuff. So anyways, a lot to talk about, a lot going on. I really want to champion the efforts that Mike, Panette, and the team, because the South, although it's, I know, been slower to get off the ground than, maybe folks wanted, but it will be the model. So that's how this goes.
It is the model.
Every time we ask, and I get it, we've been kind of poking, trying to get our heads around what's everybody doing? Why is this slow? When you really dive in and you listen to what Mike's saying, what Lester and others are saying, we're coordinating this. 6 fire safe councils, $2 million project, juggling a lot of moving parts and passion and ideas. We've never coordinated 6 fire safe councils together into one initiative the way this, to a common message, all of it. And it's going to be super exciting.
I spend 2 hours every 2 weeks, going line item by line item with the entire team. And I think we're really kind of, thanks, by the way, we should give Ken a round of applause, because he just is still 3.5 hours and 45 minutes.
I know it was longer than it should have taken.
So, kudos, I don't want to be here for another 2.5 hours.
But Ken, I do want to thank you for the information that is going on broadly across all the fire stations. There's a lot of stuff going on, so thank you.
So we started meeting, once the grant was awarded, I think it was back in fall of last year. The clock started ticking. I think it awarded in September or October. So Lester, myself, Julie from Omo Ranch, Elizabeth Scrubbin from Sand Ridge, Paul Penn of Diamond Springs, have been meeting every 2 to 3 weeks up in the Diamond Springs fire station. And it wasn't until RCD kind of brought on their project manager, Steve Grady, where things really started to, there were some issues with DOT coordination. There was some issues with Bureau of Land Management, BOR. What are we going to do here? What are we going to do? Are we going to do roadside maintenance first and then go into shaded? What's the right composition? What's the right mix? So the last month and a half has been just really honing in from the 360-degree view down to what are we going to do in the next 5 days, the next 2 weeks, the next month. And in addition to Steve and having a full complement of RCD, who is essentially spending $1.6 million of this $2.2 million grant, to do the work, to do the project management, get the crews out there to actually do the shaded field breaks and roadside maintenance. Steve, I think, came on board late November, and through the holidays, things got slow. But I literally would say the last 6 to 8 weeks has been like driving a nice 4-barrel Chevy down the highway, trying to change the pistons as you drive. A lot of very, very good things. And meanwhile, all the things that you're talking about at the county level, it's feeding down into what we're doing. So when we first started meeting before RCD had a full complement, we literally were calling upon ourselves as a group to kind of be a best case scenario, and to create a culture of, we're going to do what's right for the entire 6 councils and not be, what about me? What about me? What about me? So there's been a lot of effort, a lot of work. And we've made 2, where we tried to make a report to CAL FIRE every 90 days. So we we've now submitted 2 of our reports. One was in October and one was in January. And we have issued our first invoice for $10,000 to RCD, to CAL FIRE. And apparently, according to Lester, there's a carve out for $198,000 to Eldorado Fire Safe Council, also in the budget that's coming through. So things are starting to gel. So I don't know if you wanted to go through the presentation.
Well, I'll hand it to Janet, how you.
I was gonna say, let's finish off our partner reports.
Oh, okay.
Sure of the board, do you want to swap 7A? Item 7, since we're kind of there and go through it next before we do item 6 activity reports? Or like, what is the pleasure of the board?
I'm okay with it.
It's fine.
Okay, really quickly, Omaha Ranch, anything? Shaw is not here, I know. Anything from Grizzly Flats? Anything from Sandbridge?
Very quickly, we got our newsletter out. Misspelled.
Can I ask you what your name is?
Denise.
Denise, thank you.
Denise Romanek. And we're starting up our meetings next in a couple weeks, which we finally got an indoor location. So we're excited about that. We were meeting outside in the pasture.
This is not the weather to be after.
Right?
So that's it.
All right, thank you so much. And
We're just kinda taking
for
it.
everybody here, Denise brought her Wi-Fi, her home Wi-Fi, and we've been working this evening and so far.
It's in the window, it's in the window, so we seem to be.
Knock on wood, things are
They
going.
probably didn't like the brick.
Probably.
Rebar.
So let's move on to item 7A and let's have Mike go through his presentation.
Okay.
See if I can.
For
So,
everybody.
I'll go through this part very quickly, I think. It's Omaha Ranch, not Ranch, but there's a little typo there. But these are the 6 fire safe councils: Outcome, Diamond Springs, Omaha, Oak Hill, Patterson Ranch, Sand Ridge. And again, we've been meeting very regularly. One of the other things I'll make mention of, and it's a historical thing. When the first CWPPs were done, they weren't done with current kind of guidelines or mechanics, right? So some of the angst that Ken's talking about are from a CWPP that Barry did that put shaded fuel breaks where there isn't a density of trees. It's higher than a 45-degree slope where, Chief Vickers and Chief Yaws will not put their people. Or it's just grassland. That is not a shaded fuel break. And yet people were writing grants and projects around that, expecting them to be fulfilled. That's not a good use of our resources. So in general, what we're doing right now is we worked with the RCD and they kind of flipped the focus of where where the current thinking is in the county in terms of, rather than, I think it was 447 acres of shaded fuel break, what's now proposed is 223 acres, roughly half. And instead of, and what's happening instead is we're reducing the shaded fuel breaks because what we heard from Chief Vickers and what we heard from Fire Chief Yaws at Diamond Springs, egress, ingress, and protecting people's homes along the roadside fuel breaks is really more important than the Martinez Creek shaded fuel break that's going to serve nobody because it's mostly chaparral or grasslands. It's not a shaded fuel break. However, what we did come down to, and it still fits within the 1.6 million that the RCD has granted to them. It's just a different composition. And I think everybody can live with that because that's the focus that the county wants to go in. And RCD's being really good about this. Steve did the map. I think I sent the map to you in email and we can get it out to the teams here. But he took all of the projects and all the roads that we had submitted as part of the grant and validated them. What's a shaded fuel break? What isn't? Where in Omaha Ranch or Slug Gulch or Perry Creek Road are the most concerned pieces? Diamond Springs didn't have a CWPP, but they had projects that they wanted to have done. And they were a little concerned that some of those weren't going to be done. But in reality, some of the shaded field breaks, one in particular on Farley Road, they've known that the person that owns that property is just adamant about not having that shaded field break done. And the unfortunate part is it's the southwest corner that's gonna really have, if they did it there, it would have the biggest impact on Diamond Springs and Omo Ranch and Pleasant Valley. This is part of the process of having the difficulty of coordinating against, around people that just don't want to be compliant. In any event,
Question real quick. So for Omo Ranch, for instance, we're talking about a shaded field break. And it's on is that on a pretty steep slope?
Yes. Yes, the Martinez Creek one was extremely
So
steep.
that's the one,
Yes,
and so that's
and
mixed.
here's the thing, it's too steep. It's not dense forests. It's mostly chaparral. And it has the least impact on upstream homes in Diamond Springs or Omo.
So now if a fire starts in the canyon, I mean. Not that anything was done, but we were talking about proposing it, it would race up there and people just. Gonna have a hard time.
No,
getting out.
let me finish where I was going. So another important component, I think it was a month ago, we had the battalion chief, Vickers, come and sit with us for 2 hours. Which is a gracious use of his time, as well as Lee Yaws, who's the fire chief for Diamond Springs, since this is her territory. This is exactly her territory where Omo Ranch, Pleasant Valley, and Diamond Springs are. And to a point, Vickers said he refuses to go down, he would refuse to put his men and women in the draw at the bottom of Martinez Creek.
Sure.
They prefer to fight from the ridges where they can get their big toys in. Exactly his quote, put the big toys in and have the most impact so it doesn't go over the ridge. So we'll send around a picture. It's a map. It's an address. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is we're focused on where we can have the most impact. And it was deemed that that's not the best use of our resources for the monies that we have. So again, we'll focus on more miles and acres of roadside maintenance, because that's going to have more impact on people's homes. And certain shaded field breaks, there's one in particular in Omo Ranch that's not going to be done because it's kind of on the top of a ridge, extremely steep, and most of what's beyond it is already burned in grizzly flats. But yet it was a project that was proposed that's now being taken off the map. One of the things,
Something different than what I was thinking of then.
okay. Again, I think I'll actually print the map because they had the maps at the meeting today. And if you look at the map, you can kind of just see it laid out and say, oh, it makes sense to do that one. It doesn't make sense to do that. We're putting the resources where it makes sense. One thing I was very adamant about, because most of the issue is not in Omo Ranch or Fairplay or Outcome. It's more up in the north part of the region or the county, meaning Diamond Springs and Patterson and Pleasant Valley. Pleasant Valley is really not a big issue. It's just we have to do a lot of coordination with the DOT because they have a lot of effort focused on that right now. So one thing Steve Graydon did from RCD is he coordinated with Jennifer of DOT. And while their prescription for how they're going to go in and create these roadside maintenances is a little bit different from ours, they agreed that they would come really close to ours so that we won't have to go in behind them and spend money to finish what they didn't do. For instance, they'll only go 15, 20 feet off the road. We'll go 50 feet off the road. No closer than 100 feet to the home. So we're getting to it, which is great because initially we couldn't even get them on the phone. I mean, it's a huge win for RCD and in our project to get them to even come part way. Anyway, so why don't I go through this and then very quickly.
They're gonna fix the roads too.
We're just focusing on having this field.
You could be racing out of there and fall in a pothole and whoops, I'm gonna burn anyways.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's an issue. Okay, so it's in progress. It begins in 2023. Where proposed fuel reduction will less private property. The property owner has to do 100 feet. RCD will refuse to go close to 100 feet to the home. Because that's the homeowner's obligation statutorily. So if there's, in this, we're gonna run into this issue a lot. Because when we did the roadside reconnaissance up there, right on Nottingdale Road, there's a lot of homes very, very close to the road. So essentially, boom, they're removed. Okay. However, the shaded fuel break on those 8 parcels to the southwest remains in place because that'll protect the community, because that typically is where the fires originate from and move from southwest to northeast. So that was one particular shaded field break that I refused to take off the board because it not only helps Outingdale, it also helps Sand Ridge. And Elizabeth was all on board with that. Okay. All right, so that's one thing. So the other thing, Ken, that came up today is some of the people can't or not so much won't, but they're not able to do the 100 feet of defensible space. Either that's elderly, they don't have the money. So there's supposed to be a process where they can open that, statutory issue and try to help those people so that we don't get into a situation where 9 out of 10 people are complying, but that one home that's in the pathway is going to hurt everybody else. So all of those things are being raised as we go through this process. So I want to continue. Move it over. So here's what the map looked like when we first started. The map is adjusted now. See the pink down the bottom part where it pretty much goes down from Mount Auckham into Omo Range and then Slug Gulch. That's still there. All of the Outingdale shaded field breaks and roadside clearance is there. There's a smattering of all of those projects in the upper left-hand corner that are still on the board. I have them in slides later where they've identified. This was the original map. And as of today, we agreed on a separate map that still stays within the budgetary guidelines, but focuses again on the highest priority for the biggest bang for the buck. Why don't we move on? So in order to get this done, we had to have what's called a prescription. So when we ask somebody to come on their home, on their property with a right of entry form, what are we going to do? And this is the prescription on the far right. Trees less than 12 inches diameter at the breast height will be thinned and masticated. Chips will be, everything will be chipped on site. And the idea will be to prevent another fire hazard by having to get in more than 3 or 4 inches. So they'll chip everything, they'll limb everything up. Height of stumps, again, our prescription is 12 inches. I think the DOT's initially was 6 inches. They're now closer to 10. So
somewhere.
yeah, they came up quite a bit. And then brush, by the road and in between these trees will be kind of reduced. And they're going to try to leave a modicum of some for wildlife reasons. This is kind of a very high level summary of the treatment area. But again, that's from 50 feet from the middle of the road onto somebody's properties. Okay. Okay. It's a repeat. Brush that is treated should be cut to a maximum of 4 inches in height. What trees are we looking at? Dog fir, ponderosa pine, incense, cedar, and other conifers less than 12 inches will be cut and chipped. Spacing between other remaining trees will be 18 to 25 feet. If the slope is high, I would expect that to be a little bit closer to thin them out. Fire loves slope.
Yeah, what's going on with the oaks?
Oaks are more fire resilient. They can be limbed up. And there's no surprise that the trees that are listed here are ones that have more fire spreading potential.
I mean, oaks got so much brush in them. I cut one of those down and I'm burning that sucker for.
Yeah, but if you limit up remember the metric that, you know, if you remove all the brush away from the bottom and you space them out. So there's no chaparral or manzanita or whatever that's 5 feet high. If you limit them up to 16 to 20 feet, you'd need a 6 to 7 foot piece of manzanita to kind of get into that crown. What you're trying to do is prevent the crown from catching fire and then having a crown on fire. So if you do right roadside maintenance, you're removing all of that brush that could go up into the crown. So I don't know if it said it here, but the trees will be limbed up to about 16 feet. So the metric is if you have 3 inches, I'm sorry, a foot of grass, how high does the fire get? 3 feet. If you have a 6 foot manzanita, how high does it get? 18 feet. And it's flammable. So we're going to try to leave the good trees and remove the ones that are more flammable. That is, by the way, it took us probably a month to agree on this treatment. We went from what they did in Georgetown, Lotus, and Coloma. And we were literally refining the wording on this quite a bit.
Yeah, it just seems limited. I would hope that, you know, if a tree makes sense to remove it, that someone would, like, for instance, the digger pine.
Well, that's where he's got other conifers in here, so I think that's sort of a catch-all.
I don't call them diggers, I call them ghost pines, but either way, it's the same pine, and I've removed every single one out of 2 acres of one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if they're less than 12 inches, in fact, there's some trees on my property that are about 30 inches, and before I had my defensible space thing, I was thinking, that's too big, I want to get it out of there, but those are the trees they want you to keep. They want you to take all those smaller feeder trees out, because the bigger tree, more than likely, will be able to survive a fire if you've limbed it up properly and thinned it out. Okay, so here's an example of where a roadside is brush everywhere, trees everywhere, dead wood before and then after. It's all cleaned out. And they have other ones, they call them gallery areas, where this one right off Fairplay Road, I think, where we started our reconnaissance, where you can look off to the left side of the road. It looks like a beautiful field, and there's a tree here, there's a tree here, there's a tree here. They call that a gallery. They're gonna leave those. They'll live on that, but they'll leave those. And then we also have to be careful about riparian areas where there's streams and rivers and water. We've had in the reconnaissance that they did, which is into a GIS system already, you know, they've already identified where the fuels are. So we can actually go and do the ROEs. Okay, go ahead. Oh, I'll keep going. I didn't move that. Okay, so team is in place. The Forest Service reviewed all the road and shaded fuel sites for classification reconnaissance. DOT coordination has been done. A lot of moving pieces at the Fire Safety Council, DOT, RCD. RCD is busting at the seams, but you know, I've really been impressed with Maya, Holly, and Steve Graydon, who's got years of experience doing this. And we will be making trade-offs. I mean, when we went from 447 total acres of shaded field break to 223, that's roughly half. But we're still going to focus on the ones that are going to have the highest impact to the upstream communities. And alternatively, we're doing double the amount of linear miles of roadside maintenance, which matches what the county wants to do, which matches what the chiefs want to do, and where Cal Fire is kind of pointing us. Next, the revised RE, no, going back. We spent a lot of time on a package that we're going to spend. Timeline is accelerating. The ROE package is going to go out next week. What that means is RCD working with lists from the county, and if we have lists, do we have a mailing list? Okay, they will take those lists, and we will have a letter stuffing campaign next Thursday and Friday at RCD to send out the ROE. It's going to include a cover letter that says this is what we're going to do. It's going to have another page of the treatment. Not only what are we going to do and when are we going to do it, but what are we going to focus on. And the third page is going to be the ROE, where that person has to sign their name address, the APN number for their lot, and actually send it in. They can scan it and email it. We'll put all that information in there. They can drop it off. So it went from when are we doing it to we're doing it right now. So it's going to happen next week. And people will have roughly a month to sign them. So realizing that not everybody collects their mail or looks at their mail that as often as they should. We're going to follow up the ROE mailing next week with postcards where we need to list even more. And then we have to do a little bit more community outreach. So Elizabeth committed Sand Ridge to participate with us at essentially a community meeting to launch this. And we'll have people from RCD and others where we have like a big coming out party. We told you what we're going to do. Here it is. Come listen to what we're going to do and touch the map, see where your house is, and see if you're part of the process. March 15th, which happens to coincide, I think, with our next meeting
Oh,
here.
yes,
So June. Oh, well, we can suggest another day. We just do it the 14th because Julia has something with the Pioneer Fire Department that day. But that week would be the goal. So that's quick. Go from sending them out next week to here's your community meeting in 2 weeks. Now, again, we're really trying to coordinate all the fire safety councils. So Julia and Vermobo and Elizabeth want to definitely team with us here to have that coming out party.
So what about, I'm just thinking out loud, but what about if we kept it the same night, the 15th, so we're all on track and made it part of the program, but what about checking on the firefighters hall across from the fire station?
So Diamond Springs, Oak Hill, and Pleasant Valley were offered the Lions Hall
Right,
by somebody. And they're going to try to do it within days of when we do it, so that they're not jumping the gun, we're not jumping the gun, and we can spread RCD resources at both meetings.
Bonnie asked, and absent any other information, I conceded that the March 15th Parks Department wanted to use the facility, and so I agreed that we would, thinking we would do a Zoom meeting in lieu of an in-person meeting. But if we wanted to do something another night that week, maybe I can make arrangements too.
So if Wednesday's out and Tuesday's out, pick a day, Monday, Thursday, or Friday. In addition to that, we should try to do as much as we can communication wise with the newsletter, our website. RCD is going to be doing things on their website. We can have pointers to things on El Dorado County. And by the way, Cindy Bader has been from Outingdale, has been communicating with me on and I've been keeping her apprised. So she and their group should be invited to the one that we do here as well. So we get the biggest bang for buck because they're definitely in the process. They're on the map for being done, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
It sounds great. And so did the PG&E program, and some of it was, and some of it wasn't. One of the problems that I saw with that was for lack of oversight. It just seemed like, once the guys hit the ground, it was like an army out here, and it looked great, was going along, and then certain places got forgotten. There's trees on the ground. Some of it was an option where homeowners could keep the wood, and now they just got, we've got all this dead and down and creating obstacles. So I would really, I don't know who's going to overseeing this, but oversight, and I called Matt Carpenter at the end, and he went and returned my calls, and he was the guy overseeing the PG&E program. And so it's, we don't want this county to become a mess, right? That's the whole goal, is to keep things clean, keep things fire safe. And some of the last program, messed up my area and there's nothing
Oh,
I can do.
I mean, I have personal experience with some of the things that PG&E did on my property that I'm not too happy with.
So,
So we're trying to be, just so you know, Greg, we're trying to be the antithesis of the PG program. Okay, there's $1.6 million. Go to the next slide. I think it's the next slide, actually. That's just a map. I have that here. That's the one. See the 1.6 million down the bottom? If you can scroll up a little bit, let's see if I can move it.
Oh, yeah.
It's showing the unit acres
I don't think I can-
operator.
Well, I don't, I'm the wrong way. Yeah.
If you see that 1.6 million, that's just for the people that are the road crews. That's just the road crews. There's about another $225,000 for RCD, project management, bid process, operational elements. They're not going to be, and we have a very defined prescription / treatment. So if we get you to sign an ROE and we don't live up to what we said we were going to do on that prescription, yeah, somebody's going to squawk. But again, the goal is to not do it like PG&E, to do it very professionally. And there isn't anybody, I don't know. I haven't been up here as long as some of you people, but from what I've seen of the RCD people so far, they take their jobs very seriously and do very good work.
Yeah, I don't, they've got a long track. This is what they do. They're conservation oriented, right? They're not a company. They're working under a prescription and they built a prescription and they have a long track record of this is what they do. So
Yeah.
I don't think we should be concerned. I mean, obviously, we're all paying attention, but I don't think we're gonna have to worry about that.
No, in fact, when Steve shared these spreadsheets with us today, in our grant for shaded field breaks, we kind of estimated $2,500 per acre. And in some of the cases, he's got $4,000 an acre here, which chews up money a lot quicker. So again, I said earlier in the slide that we might have to make trade-offs depending on what we're doing and where, but the prescription is a prescription. We may do fewer homes or may do fewer shaded fuel breaks, but it's going to be very, very professionally done. And we're not doing the vetting. We're not project managers. We're Fire Safe Council. You know, we're having them, because they have the bidding process, because they have the managerial project management expertise, manage the bidding process, getting the contractors on board and administering the process. They sometimes bring in contractors. There's a story back in October, November, where RCD is one of their biggest projects right now is the Sierra Tahoe. What's that tree service? Davy or something? Davy hit a, they were going great. They were ahead of schedule. And Davy, who has the contract to do the mitigation, the fire safety, hazard safety around the, what do they call them? The chairlifts. One of their pieces of equipment hit a chairlift, knocked it off. They had to completely restart because they didn't have, RCD didn't have the contract for the chairlift area. They had it for everything else. So they did their job, but somebody else screwed up. There might be situations like that, but in the areas that we're having them do for us, they're in complete control. They own that process. And we kind of give them guidance. In fact, when Steve shared, I think you have it. Go one more. No, I don't have it.
yeah, I'm hoping there's some, okay, they're great, they have this great track record. I mean, I hear that, so I should believe it. What if they don't, and they screw up? We need to have some course of action. Hey, you know what? You've left a lot of dead and down, a lawsuit or
So the
something. like
RCD
that.
would have, that would be where we would deal with them on that. So we have a contract, we have a program that has.
Plus the oversight, what I would say too is the oversight is with CAL FIRE. This money is coming from them. Right?
I mean, there's multiple layers of the checks and balances. First of all, the fire safe, the RCD is the Fire Safe Council has hired the RCD as the project manager, and in that contract, it spells out the scope of work. And one of the responsibilities of the RCD is to ensure that they manage the project to the standards that has been agreed upon. And that includes all the things Mike talked about, how the trees are limbed up, how the materials chipped, how it's removed, the spacing, all of that is part of the contract. So the RCD is responsible to hold their subcontractors responsible to meet that standard. Their reputation is online. They're also resource professionals. They're not PG&E contractors. They are professional foresters, environmental biologists. They're responsible for ensuring all of that. But yes, as Mike said, we as the Fire Safe Council have the contract with the project manager. So we're holding them accountable to make sure they're getting it done. And ultimately, CAL FIRE can go out and inspect and ensure it's meeting all of the standards before they reimburse the Fire Safe Council for the work that gets done. There are multiple layers here. I have never heard of an issue when the Resource Conservation District is doing many projects around El Dorado County for many years, just like this. And there's a lot of discussion on the ground. They adjudicate these all the time. If folks are unhappy or they need to fix something, there's never been a complaint that isn't addressed. It's not PG&E. It's not a corporation that's obviously that's about making money. They are a resource conservation oriented group